Welcome to The Explainer. Right now in Iran, a perfect storm of economic collapse and social anger is unfolding. We're here to break down the critical events as of January 10th, 2026.
First, let's talk about the money, because the situation is absolutely dire. Iran's currency, the rial, has crashed to a historic new low. It now takes 1.4 million rials to equal just $1. Think about that. This kind of collapse has just wiped out the savings of ordinary people and made even basic goods impossibly expensive.
And while the official annual inflation rate hit an already alarming 42.2% in December, that number doesn't even tell the whole story. For families trying to put food on the table, the reality is so much worse. Food prices have exploded by a staggering 72%.
So what happens when people feel this kind of desperation? Well, they take to the streets. On a single day, January 8th, authorities recorded over 150 separate protests. That's a clear sign that this unrest is spreading across the country and fast.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down for you. We'll look at the current crisis, dig into the economic roots that got us here, track how these protests grew into a movement, examine the government's crackdown, and finally, see how the world is reacting to it all.
So let's be clear. Iran is at a real tipping point. Decades of economic pain that have been simmering just under the surface have finally boiled over, erupting into these massive protests that are now shaking the very foundations of the state.
To really get a handle on why people are in the streets, you have to follow the money, or in this case, the complete collapse of it. Let's start with the currency itself.
Just look at these numbers. The sheer scale of this devaluation is hard to wrap your head around. Back in 1979, after the revolution, a dollar was worth about 70 rials. Today, it's 1.4 million. That means the currency has lost pretty much 20,000 times its value. An entire generation has literally watched their economic security just evaporate.
And this chart shows you what that actually feels like for the average person. You know, the official inflation rate is bad enough, but when the cost of absolute necessities like food skyrockets way beyond that, it becomes impossible for so many families to make ends meet.
So you might be asking, how did it get this bad? Well, this didn't happen overnight. It's a toxic mix of factors. You have heavy international sanctions, the huge financial strain from the recent conflict, and then these long-term internal problems like economic mismanagement and deep-seated corruption.
All of that economic pain, well, that was the spark. The fire started with merchants in the historic bazaars, but believe me, it didn't stay there for long.
You can see a really clear progression here. It all started with shopkeepers in Tehran who were just protesting their financial losses. But as the demonstrations spread to other major cities, the chants on the streets started to change. They went from being about the economy to direct political demands, with people calling for an end to the entire system of government.
And this is key. This wasn't just a localized event in the capital. No way. By January 8th, protests had erupted in 27 out of Iran's 31 provinces. It had become a truly nationwide phenomenon.
So, when faced with this incredible level of unrest spreading across the country, how did the regime respond? Well, its response has been swift, severe, and sweeping.
The first thing they did, starting on January 8th, was pull the plug, a countrywide internet and telephone shutdown. This is a really drastic move, and in the past, these kinds of blackouts have been a grim warning sign, often coming right before bloody crackdowns to cut protesters off from the outside world. And then came an even more serious escalation. The government has deployed the elite Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. This is a very rare step, and it tells you that the regime now sees these protests as an insurgency, a dire security threat that justifies extreme force. And of course, this violence has come at a tragic human cost. According to reports, at least 51 protesters, including children, have been killed. Thousands have been arrested. But the violence is also taking a toll on security forces themselves, with some officers killed, and even reports of others being arrested for refusing to follow orders.
Okay, so what is the rest of the world saying about all this? As you can imagine, these events have not gone unnoticed, but the international community is far from united in its response.
We're basically seeing two distinct camps form. On one side, you have several Western democracies who are openly supporting the protesters and condemning the violent crackdown. And on the other side, you have many other nations, especially Iran's neighbors, who are stressing that this is an internal matter and that outsiders shouldn't interfere.
So, for example, here's a perspective from the George W. Bush Institute. This view frames the protests as a legitimate fight for freedom that really deserves and needs the backing of other democracies around the world. And then you have this very different viewpoint from neighboring Pakistan, which really highlights that principle of national sovereignty. It represents the position that any external involvement is just unwelcome and completely inappropriate. So, to quickly summarize the latest from Iran as of January 10, 2026, a crippling economic crisis has sparked massive nationwide protests. The government is responding with an iron fist, and the world is watching on, deeply divided on what to do. This situation is changing by the hour, and we are going to continue monitoring all the developments very closely. Our next update will be in 24 hours. To stay informed, please make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks for watching The Explainer.